they began to introduce the people. And we go behind the scenes, and it's a sort of a demonstration, a little walkthrough behind the scenes. How does a control room work, and who are the people, and what bells and whistles do they have to deal with to tell the story? So that's like the mechanics of the control room, that section in there. And lo and behold, they're covering Mark Spitz. And later on, um, they talk about, well, let's lead with Spitz. Uh, and why? Why does Jeff want to lead with Spitz? This is a big key to the story because it's part of the story. Spitz is Jewish. And that is, it's sort of like the elephant in the room. This Jewish team is on Nazi soil. Remember, this was 72. So what is that? That's 20, 2 years, 20, sorry, uh, 28 years after armistice, such as it was. And it's still fresh on their mind. And you remember Marianne the translator is challenged by Marvin Bader. Well, where were your parents? They were alive. And I'll bet they didn't know either. That's the complaint. What's wrong with the Germans? They knew. And then Bader, what does he do? He realizes, oh my God, I've offended her because she wasn't even born then. So he apologizes and says, welcome to ABC. So again, that sets an emotional tone for how
I
delicate.
think she says it wasn't, they're not me.
Yeah, she does say
Yeah.
that.
I thought that was a really powerful line
Yeah.
that she said.
Well, a couple of years ago, I made a documentary on the artist Arthur Schick, who created cartoons lampooning Hitler and Mussolini and Hirohito. And as we were putting the film together, we had two historians from the German Historical Museum. This is a huge museum, merging of the East German Museum of History and the West German Museum of History into one location. The new wing, it was designed by I.M. Pei, and it's a wonderful place to visit. And we were working with one of the historians there who was German born. He was about 30 at the time. This was '08. So he was born in 78, maybe 73. And I asked him, so how do Germans your age feel about, or how do you feel about the history of Germany and the Holocaust? And he said, well, it was a horrible thing, a terrible thing to have happened, but I'm not responsible for what they did. But I do have the responsibility to make sure it doesn't happen again, that everybody knows about it. And to me, that sort of set things right. I mean, I was not opposed to him. He was this very nice guy and really into our subject matter, and he couldn't have asked for a better collaborator. But that was an important thing to learn. It's not me, but I willingly take on the responsibility to tell the world what happened and to prevent it from happening again. So that's what you do with a legacy. What Jews do with the legacy of Gaza now is something else. We don't have to go there. But this film resonated with so much, and it was all subcontextual, if I can use that word. So let's dive into the film again. And so, again, Jeff insists on doing this interview with Spitz. Why? Because it's part of the story. So there's a funny line later on. This is not politics. This is about emotions. And Rune Arledge always says throughout the whole thing, we're telling a story, follow the story. Even when his team turns against him. There are all these arguments about should we stay, should we go, what do we do? And Arledge is pretty clear pretty quickly, we have to stay. And that's a theme throughout the film when they try and take the bird away from him and they give it back and then they try and pull him out. And he just says, no, we're staying, and he hangs up the phone. And New York's got to let them go because it's a live feed. So again, that's Rune Arledge, a big emotional introduction to his character very early on. And who else do we meet? Oh, Jeff walks in and he's like the young dude, the smart guy. But he really is, because he walks in and he's totally prepared for the day, right? He rattles off what the lineup is. And he's not trusted that much by Bader or Arledge because he's the new kid. And he's only done golf tournaments before. Remember, this is the sports unit, right? This is not the hard news team. And there's a moment, maybe you remember it, when Arledge is lecturing to the team. He says, come on, we're the only people here. We have to proceed with this and follow the story, you know. and it's something we must do. And he wins them over, and then they become a team, a real team. I mean, they were collaborators before on sporting events, but now they're forced into an area that's new for them, news gathering. But lo and behold, news gathering isn't that much different from sports events in that you got to cover the action, right? So they proceed to try and cover the action. That's like there's a big pod in the film where they try and set it up. They move the camera outside. They have Peter Jennings on the roof. They set up the guy running film in. It's all these moving parts, and they never stop. I mean, this film was amazing, wasn't it? Did anybody get bored? Never. Did anybody get confused? No.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Tell me when.
Sometimes about the ranking of the characters, the supervision, who was whose boss,
Uh,
etc. I got a little mixed up at times.
but eventually it was clear, right?
Yes. Yeah.
That Arledge, the guy in the white shirt, and Jeff were fighting the networks back in New York.
Yes.
They pull out, and they say no. Okay. And that did that disturb you, the confusion, or did you just carry on and follow the action, the
I
storytelling?
just followed the action, and it didn't matter. It was the flow of events that carried the day. It
Yeah,
didn't matter.
carried us all. I mean, we've all seen action movies or horror films, and they're supposed to, or thrillers. This was thrilling from 11 minutes into the end. Thrilling. I mean, I wasn't watching the clock. It was like boom, boom, boom. It was like a montage, and Michael may appreciate this more than others, but it's like little bits and pieces, but it was all scripted. And I'll bet it was pretty much scripted in that order. So think of the writers on this picture. They had to know the facts of how it went down. There's probably a lot of documentation of it, and they saw plenty of footage. And they said, well, how can we as screenwriters tell this story? And it was such a big story, they had to introduce all the characters really quickly and put them in motion right away so that when the shit hits the fan, they're really there. And guess who's there with them? We are, because we know the people. And this was one of the things that struck me. You get to know these characters and root for them throughout all, this huge global event is happening. And yet you are with them because they care so much about telling the story that we feel is important. Linda, did you have something?
Yeah, the only thing which bothered me was the level of competitiveness of trying to be the first to report the news. Now, granted, this was a tragic event that journalists wanted to communicate, but there also be the concern of, gee, I don't want the other networks to get this news before me. So for me, that was a little bit of reduced their commitment to being there with these people to tell a story, because there also was the fact that it's a commercial operation and they have to make sure that they're the first ones to report the news to beat out the competition.
But that was a real concern, as it still is today, right? News is a competition for eyeballs.
Yeah, but today, you talk about 50 years later
Yeah.
with social media. That was the other thing I thought about, how different it would be if this event happened in 2025, because of all of the technology that's out there with the satellites and phones and social media, and it's almost impossible for one group to tell a story anymore because everybody becomes a consumer of a lot of the communications, and they become the narrators of those conversations.
Yeah, Michael.
I was going to say, though, ultimately, it is the more experienced people in the room who hold out, and they ultimately don't go with it until they have the second source that they take off the wire. And it's only at that point that they go with it because they now have a reasonable, even if ultimately mistaken, level of confidence that they're reporting the story accurately.
But towards the end, they were almost willing to compromise that to be the first one in. And
Well,
they were
Jeff was. Jeff was. The others didn't want him to do it. And Marvin almost hits him afterwards. He said, "You fool, I told you not to do that, and you did it."
right.
And then there's the double take where, oh, they're all safe. Oh no, they're all dead. And it's like, even though he was first proven right and then proven wrong, what happens to Jeff at the end? We know he's assigned the next morning's broadcast to run it. So Arledge forgives him because of the bravery and courage and thinking on his feet that he showed. in this day.
And he
But
gets a promotion too.
Yeah. Well, Arledge ordered him to do it too. I mean, it was on Arledge, obviously,
to
a
do
mistake to proceed and, without the absolute confirmation that they were okay.
well, I think it came down to Jeff's decision. There's that long moment where
Well, Jeff, yeah, but
he could have not done it, but he did.
Ren Arledge was the captain of the ship, and he gave orders to Jeff to run it. Jeff thought about it, and then
He ran it.
he said, "Okay."
Yeah.
Yeah.
Betty?
Yeah, one thing I thought that was interesting to your point about that it held our interest all this time. We all knew what was going to happen. I mean, I remember it very vividly, and I imagine we all do. And yet we stayed with this movie, and we knew that when they first reported that they were all safe, you wanted to feel relieved, but you knew that wasn't really what happened. And I think that speaks to how it was done, that it held our interest, even though we knew what the outcome would be.
Yeah.
I think what was so interesting is how unprepared the Germans
Yes.
were to handle this situation. It was shockingly so. And before they report that they're safe, there's even a German official who's on television who's reporting that they've all been saved and released. I think that to me, what was most interesting was the ethical issue that comes up in the middle of the film about the viewing if they shoot somebody. How are we going to deal with that? It's a live feed, and how would the parents of that individual feel about seeing their son being murdered on television? Do we show it? Do we not show it? I thought that was, I'm sure the news teams wrestle with that kind of moral issue all the time in telling a story. What do we show? What do we not show? I thought that was fascinating.
Yeah. Welcome to editing, but that was in real time. You don't know retakes or change that cut. This was live. But that was a very interesting three-way conversation in the hallway. Just Bader, Jeff, and Arledge. And Arledge and Bader were opposed. They fought each other. And what do you think, Jeff? And Jeff comes up with a solution. Right? We'll stall. If that begins to happen, we'll cut to the other tape. We'll stall. We'll have a moment to think about how to proceed. And they say, good, let's go do it. And, that's part of his ingenuity. He's a problem solver. Ask anybody who's directed a film. I solve problems every day, about 1,000 of them, and that's the life. It's not just what camera do I cut to at this moment, but what ethical decision do I make? And that's what this film was so good at doing. And it sort of beats the pants off of any news movie that a network studio has done, like the one with Holly Hunter and I forget what it was called, Broadcast News or something. Albert Brooks made it. And, it's all this romanticized, run with a tape down the hall. No, that's just the mechanics. But that passed in its day. That's probably a 20-year-old picture, 30 years old. This was in the heart of it, wasn't it? And Betty, I think, you said you were held at every moment. Part of it is because every moment was calculated to hold your attention. Each little mini scene was no more than 20 or 30 seconds at the most, and many were shorter. And there were a lot of clues that were progress shots that were shown in it. But that was all done in somebody's head first, and then on paper, and you move the pieces around to make it make sense. I doubt that much of it was made up on the set. Can't say for sure, but it's a real accomplishment to tell a story with that many moving parts, that simply and that clearly, and also to make the characters sympathetic. But I think what glossed over the ease of it, you stop watching the movie and you're watching the characters' feelings. That's what's cool about this. And we see Marianne, and her feelings are different, and we see the guy soldering the telephone, and he's a little bit different. He's the one who told Marianne, "Can you get me a coffee?" And then he realizes he's told by a colleague, "Oh, you just sent the only woman there who could translate for us." So then he brings her the coffee. It's little things like that that make it real. And that's all. They didn't call attention to it. I did, but so many moments in this film were built like that to humanize all the characters.
I didn't remember, but I thought it was fascinating also that the Olympic Committee didn't stop the games immediately, but they allowed the sports to go on
It started.
if they had already
Yeah.
started. So there was a volleyball game
Yeah.
going on and so forth. The only thing that kind of disappointed me a little bit at the end, and you know how you have those things at the end that sort of follow up.
Yeah.
And I was a little disappointed that they didn't mention anything about that the Olympic Committee has never really fully, it's been done piecemeal, but
Yeah.
it's never really acknowledged what happened at the 72 Olympics. And it took decades
Uh-huh.
before they even, at any of the Olympic Games, did any kind of memorial or anything to the athletes who died. And nothing about certainly what happened to the terrorists who planned the assault.
Well, in a way, that's about justice, and this film is not about justice. This is
Yeah.
the story out, which is a form of justice. The truth will out. But I want to go back to your mention of they let the games go on that were in progress. I'm sure the Olympic Committee was saying, well, maybe it won't get too bad. We can let it go on, and at any cost, they're going to go on. The show must go on. How much denial was in their minds thinking we have to make this as flawless a set of games as we can because our national honor is at stake. And, it came back to bite them. The army was prevented from coming in because of the military past. So it had to be the civil police. It's just like Trump calling in the National Guard to California or Chicago. It's like, who has jurisdiction here? And they were so deferential to the rule of law that they blew it from that aspect. And they had other chances. Somebody calls out all the other things they bumbled. Oh, like the cops in disguise crawling on their bellies on the roof, And it was clear, even Jeff in the control room said, these guys aren't cops, or they're not trained for this. They don't even know how to hold a gun. And then they were withdrawn. What? And that was a very interesting part of the movie. They did such a good job of covering the scene that they realized, oh my God, the terrorists can watch all our coverage on TV. Now, is that kind of meta?
That should have been obvious, though, right away, shouldn't it?
Well, it wasn't to anybody, I mean, who knows what the real timeline was. But, it's all, maybe they took license with that. But the point is that the medium begins to be part of the story, right? So the consequence of that was that police had to be called off because that was a suicide mission. They knew they were coming and they knew where they were. And very interesting, and it's really a very media conscious movie, but it's not central. It's just there propelling the action. Two questions, Frank. You had another, and then Michael.
Yes, I thought a very interesting roundabout a problem when they were prevented from telecasting themselves. They were focusing on another network and superimposing the ABC logo.
That's the competitor.
That was something.
Well, it goes way back before movies. The studio, before World War II, the studios were very competitive before television about who got the credit for this or that. So it's when you blend art and business that the business often rears its ugly head, and drives the bus. Betty, oh, sorry, Michael, then Betty.
Yeah, I had just wanted to talk about the thing that you actually just brought up, the moment where they suddenly realize that the terrorists are watching their feed. Um, because to me, it was sort of the third major ethical moment of crisis in the film, other than the other two we already discussed. And it also seems to be the one that the characters give the least weight to, oddly enough. Like it dawns on them very slowly what's happening, and no one is like, oh my God, we have to cut the cameras right away. It's just they're slowly trying to figure out, oh, can we see a TV in there? Oh, the power's not off.
Well,
I
that's
think I see a TV. And it doesn't come to a head until the police actually burst in with their guns. That and then they kick them out, but they also realize well, they call off the operation and that's that. But no one is ever like, oh my
right.
God, we could have gotten all those people killed.
Yeah, no, but let's go back to your point that it took them too long to realize the terrorists could see it. I think that's kind of blinders that you wear, that when you're broadcasting a story, you're the author, and it's the most important thing in the world to get out until you get it out to the people who are involved in the story. So it folds back on itself. And it's just fascinating, the lessons it has for us. The how you tell the news is part of the news itself. The medium is the message. And now more than ever, where the news is a political arm of some ideologue and not really a people chasing after the same facts to get first to broadcast the same facts. It's people first to trumpet whatever they want. Excuse the pun. Uh, so I didn't think it took too long for them to realize it. Again, it all comes from Jeff's face and his performance without saying words. You see him thinking, and then the realization comes on him, and then they say, we gotta stop it. But there's a moment later where they blame the German police. Why didn't they pull the plug on the whole building? Well, they weren't trained for this. Would have been the first thing any American big city police force would do. But this was 1972. And again, the British were in denial. It's not going to come from our people. Yeah, Betty?
Yeah, I just, getting back to the police and, all the bumbling and they weren't really trained for this and prepared to do this. And Israel offered to send over a team who
Yeah.
was specially
Yeah.
trained, I think, in dealing with hostages. And they offered to, and I kept wondering afterwards if, and the Germans said no, they didn't want the Israelis, they didn't want their help, and even though they knew that they were in over their heads, and I kept wondering, would the outcome have been different had they allowed the Israelis
You're one of those
to
people who
have the training?
you like to write another script, but um, that's a very important point that you brought up. Um, and it is pointed out, I think Marianne in the hallway with probably Bader and Jeff, and they're discussing what went wrong. They refused the Israeli army. Now, what do you think was behind their thinking, the strategic thinking of the Olympic Committee and the city of Munich? I think they were too embarrassed to admit they needed help. They were still under this deception that they could do it. And it was
and maybe
what
they
you're breaking up.
that the Jews wanted to be the one who handled it, successfully saved the Israelis,
Of course, but
given that happened in World War II and all.
Yeah, but that's like, no, we need some glory now. Doesn't matter how we get there.
Well,
No, how you get there
that was
matters.
part of the thinking.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's like everybody's guilty of some blind thinking or self-centered thinking, just like the news team. Let's talk about the news team. They were sports, right? They carried, Jim McKay, the thrill of victory and the agony of defeat. Crash, the ski jumper falls. That's what they covered. And it was still a pretty primitive time in television. That was a nice board and a nice control room. They could take a lot of feeds. And they had lots of telephones, but still they had to rely on cleverness, like the sound guy jerry rigging the telephone so they could broadcast Peter Jennings reporting from the rooftop. very clever, but you had to do that when you had no other means. Today, they just patch them in because it's a digital signal. Um, so it's kind of cute in its primitiveness, but at the same time, that's the situation they were thrust into, and we saw how they responded. Um, there was a personal situation. The German electrician wouldn't get the cables, and they needed more cables. And finally, they called Marianne in. Marianne, the problem solver, and she talks to him sweetly in German. And if you, I've seen this twice. So I was reading the subtitles. First, she says, "Oh, yes, I understand. It's really awful with people spend all this money and they come in here whining, right?" So, yeah, of course he feels that way. Step one, she gains his trust, just like the hostage negotiator tries to negotiate, the woman tries to negotiate with the guy in white, the leader of the terrorists. Step two, he said, "Yes, but think of all the glory that will fall upon Germany. Think of our responsibility. You are just as much a part of this as the athletes." And lo and behold, the cables appear. So she broke through the bureaucratic requirements and got to him as a person. And that's so true of this film and of any negotiation. And the NBC Oslo, the film of the play about the Oslo Accords being formed. And it's not a great movie. It's kind of obvious, but it tells the lesson quite well that until people on opposite sides of an argument get to know each other as people, they can't solve the problem. But once there's some empathy and you begin to be able to see the story or the viewpoint of the other person from their point of view, not from yours, then you can make progress. It doesn't mean you'll get to win-win. Win-win just means you can find a solution that allows both of you to go forward with your lives. But it doesn't happen. And of course, it's not going to happen in Gaza for some time. It's too complicated, too many players. But it's a lesson, a life lesson, and maybe we've all known it, that you have to understand, you have to see things from the other person's point of view. And until you do that, you don't know them and you can't empathize with them. And therefore you can't devise a solution to please them and negotiate your way to a better solution. Interestingly, first, they don't believe it's gunshots, right? That happens around 11 minutes into the film. And I think that's good. It could have been 9, but big deal, and everybody doubts it. Was that gunshots? I've never heard gunshots. So was that gunshots? The Americans, we're a nice peaceful nation. Although we did have before it, I think the tower shooter in Texas was 71. Guy in a University of Texas tower shot 12 people or 15 people with a high-powered rifle. So we have our crazies too, more than.
Yeah, something else significant happened 1 year before that. Do you remember? It was like Betty said, you remember where you were when things like this happened.
Yeah.
Almost exactly 1 year before that was the Attica prison riot in upstate New York, and it was a similar situation, a hostage situation.
Right.
The inmates had taken
guards,
a whole lot of the prison guards hostage, and the same result that happened in New York with all their fancy technology and better training. The New York State troopers went in and killed a lot of prisoners and all of the guards. Same result.
And
1 year before
killed,
that,
but the guards were shot by the prisoners or by friendly fire?
New York State troopers, the New York
them.
State police.
Why would they
open fire?
Them?
Well, it was incredible. I mean, there were a lot of troopers, and they were going to get those guys no matter what.
Yeah.
And they opened fire. No, they didn't intend to kill the prison guards, but they did.
Yeah.
They all died.
All right.
Same result 1 year earlier.
Yeah. So I
think they killed, if I recall, 60 inmates died, 60 plus, and there were at least a dozen prison guards. So all got killed. Similar circumstance.
Well,
1 year before.
We have the gift of hindsight, but it's up to us to deal with now, and that is, this has always been with us. The crazies have always been there, hiding under rocks for the most part, until recently they've gotten guns and used them. So
Jim, I'm afraid I've got to get going. I'm in Chicago. It's 10 o'clock. It's late, but I just want to thank you for recommending this film. I thought it was absolutely terrific. And I have to tell you that in spite of everything, I thought that ABC, even at the time, I thought they did an amazing job of covering that disaster. I don't remember, it was like 24 hours straight that it was going
Yeah.
on. And the fact that it was a news team that was covering it,
Sports team covered it like a news team.
yes, it was just it was amazing, and the film was great. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, these people were heroes, right? In a way, they did heroics. They risked their careers in terms of Jeff or Bader or even Arledge. But that was not life-threatening. But they didn't think of themselves. They just thought of the story, getting the word out.
Right.
Um, let's see. I'm just looking at my notes. And as the situation unwound and they didn't have any coverage, they built the tension through listening to German radio and having Marianne translate. I thought that was very interesting.
I wanted to say I thought Marianne was probably the main or certainly one of the real heroes of. I mean, she was just supposed to translate, and she was in the center of everything. So
Well,
She was actually sent in an area where there was gunfire. He
yeah.
said, "Here, grab my keys, go."
No, she took it. She took
and
it.
she went.
Yeah,
That's
very brave. But
Yeah.
again, it's like she was as involved in the story as the American team was, and she also at some point, quite late in the picture, says why this is so important to Germany to get it
Yeah.
right. I maybe I have in my notes somewhere. Some of these, they got the idealism out without a lot of smarmy bullshit. It wasn't exaggerated. It wasn't overly sentimental. It was like the cold stuff. One sentence and she was done, but it carried a lot of mail.
Yeah, she said innocent people died on German soil again.
Right. There you go. Yeah. So again, the Americans tend to forget that. Part of their ingenuity, they pull out the map of the village, and that kind of gives them an idea of where to place the cameras. And Marianne finds out who the people are, the team is, by looking up the program for the Olympics. No American thought of that. They thought of, oh, go to find a helicopter pilot or a bus driver and get the story from them. Okay, but that I thought was kind of cute, fun. And then Jeff is put in charge around 25 minutes, and that's when the friction from ABC comes in and says, no, we want the news team to cover it. But, this team already has people and cameras inside, and they're running film back and forth across the checkpoint. And Arla just slams the phone down after saying, no, it's us. We're doing it. And then Peter Jennings reports from the roof, this is no longer the Olympics. That's a loaded line, meaning it's an international event.
Yeah.
And but that, Michael, I'm glad you raised that point about the ethics of where are you there? The ethics of shooting, showing a live shooting on television for the whole world to see. I don't know if that's done at all. I mean, we've seen it in documentaries, and it's pretty horrific. Of course, it was broadcast when ISIS beheaded Jeffrey Pearl. I didn't see it, but they intentionally did that, and the horror is part of the effect that they wanted. And who knows what else was broadcast.
Yeah, Jim, I had sent you an article, but it was interesting that this event apparently inspired other terrorist groups because it brought attention to the terrorist group and how evil they could be. So, again, we live in a very different world in 2025, But
Yeah.
in the time of this 1972, it was brand new. And I'm sure many people watching this saying, who are these people? They're terrible. They're going to hurt. And there was some in the article ramifications that it in some ways empowered terrorist groups
I
because
couldn't
they
get
got
that
the
far into it.
coverage on the
I recommend,
television.
if anybody wants it, email me. I have it, and it is interesting and is just more background um, to it. So
You can publicize a terrible event, but sometimes that is what the terrible people want. They want people to pay attention to them.
it's called a copycat shooting, isn't it?
Yes.
Copycat
Yes.
killing, copycat terrorist group. Um, and it was particularly poignant when at the very beginning they showed David Berger talking about this is what the Olympics are for, playing with friends, and then we learn out he's dead. He's the
Yeah.
first person who was killed. And they play that tape, sorry, they play that tape after it's announced that he's dead. Just the way they handled the film, running, pretending he was a contestant, running it back and forth, the woman in the lab, the woman who did the graphics on camera, that is shoot actual letters she put up on a board. This is like it was glue to everything, but it showed the progress and led up to when, like, the ABC logo was shown over it. So when other people stole the feed, ABC would get the credit. And well, I ran out of notes. But I want to, if you want to kick this around some more.
Jim, I'm trying to remember the Olympics that were held on. Wasn't there? There
A
wasn't
bombing. Yeah, there was a bombing.
It was a bombing. So we really, what did we learn? What has
I think
the
that was the pipe
security around the
bombing.
Olympics learned from this very tragic incident?
Was that the pipe bomb and the
It
security
was the
arrested and then
I can't
domestic
remember the
terrorist.
specifics.
It was one of these bombs. I don't know if it was a pipe bomb, but it had nails and shrapnel in it,
Yeah.
and it injured a whole lot of people.
Yeah, well, like the Boston Marathon and the two guys,
Yeah.
the two brothers. It's out there. But I want to stress a lot that this film survives on the strength of the performances and the writing and the characters. That's what binds us to the story. And it almost doesn't matter what's happening out there. We see what's happening to the storytellers. And so we're reading the story off them and their concerns by they're showing us what's important to look at.
Jim, this is a very interesting time for our group, particularly in watching this movie because the preparations for the Olympics here and having this in our heads about, reading about what's going to be done for protection.
It's going to be serious. I was here in the '84 Olympics, and they were wonderful because people left town and the streets were wide open.
Yeah.
And there was not much security at any of the events, and we saw a lot of them. Not going to be that way this time, even if they fix the train to the airport. And that's the least of their worries. But there's going to be a whole lot of security. It'll be federal as well. Trump will try and get in and take credit for it. I don't know who's running the Olympic Committee, but if you remember, Peter Uberoth, yeah, ran the Olympics. They ran that at a profit, and then they used the profit to create children's sports programs, live sports programs, not media programs, but actually outdoor activities for kids.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know who's running it this time. They're a lot smarter. We're all a lot smarter, and you can bet that the network's going to get into that security issue as well. And there will be no way to hack into the satellite feeds from terrorists, but who knows? Maybe there will be. So yeah, it's really like a prequel to 28, when the same issues will confront us. Now, I want to talk about something. There's another movie about this subject, and I thought we might see it next. Steven Spielberg did a film called Munich, and it's about this subject. It's very different, but a woman, it was 2005, and recently a woman rescreened it and wrote an article for the New York Times about how it brought back not just those moments, but she said it explained the whole Israeli-Gaza conflict as clearly as anybody has ever explained it. And that really piqued my attention. So it would also be fun to compare how the fictionalized story, which is probably more about the victims than about the news team. But it would be interesting to see how Spielberg covers the news team. And he made that 20 years before this film. So we'll see. And it's did not get great reviews. It didn't make a lot of money. But if there's interest, I would program it, or we can just see it, or I can see it before you and decide, no, it's not good enough. But I do plan on seeing it to kind of throw light back onto this film. We're only going to have one film next month, and I suppose it should be mid-month rather than at the end of the month because we're all going away. And I don't know what we're going to do yet. I thought we might do something fun for the holidays, or then I thought we might do something more exotic and strange, but I don't know. I don't think we do that well with strange movies like Mickey 1, but I was still tempted with 8.5. Every now and then somebody says, "Oh, it's such a wonderful film," and it is, but it's very intellectual and you have to follow it. But it's easier to follow than Mickey 1, that's for sure. So I'll let you know. Any more questions or comments or suggestions for future films? There are lots of really good films out now for the holiday season, and you should look into them. If you want to get good reviews, just go New York Times Film Review and then put in the title, and there'll be a pretty good guide of what would interest you.
Nuremberg, I would
Yeah.
recommend. It's excellent.
You saw it already. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, that's about Goering and a psychiatrist have a one-on-one with each other. It's an argument back and forth. And who plays the Russell Crowe plays
is really amazing in that role.
Goebbels,
Yes.
Russell Crowe, and I think Ethan Hawke does Ethan Hawke play the psychiatrist?
Michael Shannon,
Michael Shannon. Okay,
and it's Goering, I believe.
yeah, Goering. Yeah, GOE spelled the same way. So that's worth seeing. And there's so many others out. Do take advantage of them. A lot of them are streaming. They go to streaming very quickly. I hear House of Dynamite is not as great. Has anybody seen it? Yeah, I'm a big fan of Catherine Bigelow, but sometimes people get too good and too big, and they go over to the other side. That's about a incoming missile, and what will the military decide to do about it? And
Did anybody watch The Hurt Locker? I didn't.
I did. That's a good tense film. Again, really well shot, well made. The performance was excellent. Was that Matt Damon?
That was Bigelow was the director. I don't.
Yeah, she
I don't
was the
know who
director.
in it.
Jeremy
She got
Renner,
the
I think.
Academy Award for that.
Was Jeremy Renner? Yeah.
I believe so.
I didn't watch it.
That's what
Anybody
we're
else
seeing. I
besides
mean,
Bill
it's a
Walker?
tense movie, and it's you try and do that job and come away sane. And if you want, I can send out a list of recommendations of films to see. But just read the newspaper or Google New York Times on Fridays. That's when they have the film reviews. I think you can see them for free once, and that's a good source of leads. And then there's all kinds of Jewish films coming out. Did anybody see the movie called Twins about the twins who survived Dr. Mengele?
No.
It's in the running for an Oscar. It's an okay film, but it's more you see the surviving twins, and there's one of the pair who survived, and you see them on camera talking about their experiences. And then there's a reunion in Israel of all the surviving twins, and that's very moving. But it's basically talking heads, but good talking heads. And I'm just blanking on other things to see. Let me pull up
Just
mine.
wanted to mention,
Those gunshots?
Oops, sorry, it's running live.
Mark the one.
Lucky you don't.
I just
yeah.
wanted to mention, because you had mentioned Munich. I saw it a long time ago, so I don't remember, but I remember being very impressed with it. I thought it was very well done. And I know you keep mentioning 8.5, and if you do it, I'd love to.
Yeah.
I'm very interested.
Well, you're the only one who seems to jump up and down for that, but I'll bet there are more. Michael and Steve would like it, but that's really not enough. Hold on, I'll tell you my current list of darlings. Oh, okay. I can't find it right now. I don't want to waste your time. But let's keep watching movies, and it was a good discussion. I'm so glad you all liked it, and we're moved by it, because that's what it's all about. I didn't say hello to Arlene Schwimmer. Thanks for joining us. Good to see your name up there.
Hi, see you.
And Mitchell, same with you in front of Niagara Falls there, or is it in South American Falls? And Brenda, hi to you. Okay, so you'll hear from me quite soon, I hope in 2 weeks, about what's coming up next.
Thanks very much, Jim.
Thank
Very
you.
good.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Bye.
And
Thanks,
happy
Jim.
Thanksgiving to
Yes.
everybody.
And happy
Thank you.
holidays.